Hey friends, welcome back to Hey Wait. Today's episode feels especially meaningful and honestly a little surreal for me to share with you because my guest isn't just someone I admire professionally. She's the mentor whose work has shaped my life more than anyone else's. And if you've worked with me or even just followed my work, you've already been impacted by her too, whether you knew it or not. Nancy Dreyfus is a psychotherapist and an author, and I'm going to just go ahead and call her the OG teacher, maybe even the Yoda of helping people bring their insides and their outsides into alignment. Her best-selling book, Talk to Me Like I'm Someone You Love, Relationship Repair in a Flash, has helped countless people, myself included, find the words they didn't know they needed in moments of emotional gridlock. And Nancy's influence runs deep. She's who introduced the concept of relationship repair to the John Gottman, the now famous couples research. But Nancy's real gift is helping you connect to your own inner grown-up, the part of you who knows you don't have to betray yourself to stay loyal to someone else, the part who understands differentiation, the ability to be truly yourself even when someone else wishes you'd be different, isn't a betrayal. It's health. It's wholeness. She has an almost magical intuitive feel for what's missing or unspoken in a moment between people, and an equally magical ability to put words to feelings you've carried for years but didn't know how to articulate, which I think you're going to be able to experience firsthand as you listen today. Nancy's thinking is now moving beyond the therapy room into the wider world, helping us to understand how early relational patterns lay the foundation for the political divides and authoritarian fears we're navigating today. And if you listen to the very first episode of this podcast, you already know that a teaching story Nancy shared with me years ago planted the seed that eventually became the Hey Wait method itself. So if you haven't listened to that first episode yet, you're going to want to go back and hear it. Which is to say, this conversation is a full circle moment. And it's a chance for you, dear listener, to experience the incredible wisdom, precision, and warmth of a woman whose work can, and I don't say this lightly, change the way you live with yourself and with the people you love. I am honored to introduce you to my mentor and my friend, Nancy Dreyfus. I could not be more thrilled for me and for my guest to have you here, Nancy. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm actually having a moment as soon as I pressed record. This is really meaningful to me. I was thinking this morning about the first phone call I had with you. And it wasn't our first session. It was to get information from you. I was pacing in my then boyfriend's driveway outside to try and get some privacy. And in that conversation, you gave me more insight. You saw me more clearly. And you also called me up in a way that made me feel like, oh my gosh, if I work with this woman, she's going to change my life. And you did. And this morning I was thinking, I would have never thought as I was pacing out there at my wit's end in the relationship I was in, that I would find myself sitting here with you today in this way.
Oh, I wish I could remember what I actually said to you in that call, but I suspect I didn't think you were living in your biggest self.
That's true. That's true. And you shared a couple of your brilliant interventions with me just briefly to get a sense of what my background was. And it was as if you could just down the line diagnose, bing, 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 and here's what we do to help you be your biggest self.
Well, it's really thrilling to see somebody who's been, I would say, one of my most gifted students interviewing me today. So I've been very excited about it. Yeah.
Me too. So you have been a psychotherapist for decades. And one of the ways you've described your work that I so appreciate is you said that it is about helping people deal with the consequences of being true to themselves. And I think the listener can probably relate to that, because if you've ever tried to be true to yourself, you know there are consequences. And in order to help someone do that, it strikes me that you absolutely have to have done that yourself. So can you share how that process began for you?
I would love to. Over 40 years ago, Jay, I was in what today would have been called a Me Too situation. I actually was in a different career as a journalist, and a well-known writer in New York, had 30 years older than my father, had taken me on and was going to further my career. It was definitely a Me Too. It wasn't the worst. I didn't feel that coerced, but it became quite abusive. And at a certain point when he became emotionally violent with me, I brought myself into therapy. And when I recognized I was with an older, actually he was a critic. I had a father who basically never related to me. So there we had the father figure, and a mother who could only criticize. So there I was.
Oh, wow.
And this is a defining moment when I began realizing certain ways I had been taken advantage of. I wanted to go confront him. And my therapist, Roger, did something amazing. He said, right now you don't need to stand up for yourself. You need to have a self.
Whoa, wait, can you say that again? Because that was...
Yes. He said, right now, you don't need to stand up for yourself. You don't yet have a self. He says, you need a self, not to stand up for yourself. And I didn't know what it meant, but if you listen for a couple of minutes, you'll get an idea of it. In a moment of unfiltered whatever, I shared something very embarrassing with him. It's still even a little embarrassing today. I loved elevator music. You know, the kind of music that people roll their eyes. It's like canned, I will say it, it's canned music. It's much easier for me now because I like new age music. No one has a problem with that, but I liked elevator music. And I knew it was embarrassing, but I loved it because it was soothing. I came from a chaotic home, and I liked it. I didn't tell too many people. And he said, this is your first therapy assignment. I want you to go to 3 people who will likely judge you for liking elevator music, and I want you to tell them that you like it. And I have to tell you, I was this close to quitting therapy because it just felt irrelevant and embarrassing.
Sure.
I worked for a newspaper at the time, and I approached the rock critic newspaper, somebody who was a cellist in a string quartet, and somebody in my neighborhood who thought she was the second coming of Joni Mitchell's. And I shared with them that I loved elevator music, wanting to kill my therapist. And I would love to tell you that everybody said to me, oh my God, Nancy, you're so authentic. They did look at me like I had 2 heads. But I learned I could survive. And as my therapist, Roger, said to me, Nancy, do you like elevator music? I said, I love elevator music. I buy albums at the time wrapped in brown paper so no one can see. And that moment of just being radically and embarrassingly true to myself really put me on an entire life course about staying connected to my own insides and not to be ashamed of things about myself I might be ashamed of.
And that's how you got a self to begin with.
That is definitely how I got a self. Now, I will give you another defining moment. And many of the defining moments in my life, Jay, have come out of desperation and not knowing what else to do. I was in a graduate school program. I decided to leave journalism to become a shrink. And I was in a master's level program of 22 people, and they were only taking 6 of us, 22. There were 22 of us. They were only taking 6 of us into the doctoral program. I had people there who thought I was extraordinary, people there who thought I was flaky. It was not a done deal. And I applied to the graduate program at Adelphi University in Garden City, Long Island. I got through a number of rounds of interviews and hoops. And the final interview is they take 10 candidates and they put you at a round table for 4 hours, 2 hours, a lunch break, 2 hours, with no leader, but 3 therapists are watching you through a one-way mirror interact. Okay, the year was 1979. Very different, a little bit political climate. There were 10 people. I was one of 2 Caucasians. And I was the only person in the room who was not part of a minority or a perceived victim group. There was a daughter of a Black Panther. There were 2 people organizing grape pickers. There was somebody who was a radical head of some lesbian collective. And the topic that everybody was talking about is how the poor are underserved for therapy. And even many years later, I feel a little awkward. I'm going to be walking my talk right now saying things that may be a little politically incorrect. And for 2 hours, this group, everybody was coming up with better ideas to serve the poor. Okay. I am a doctor's daughter from northern New Jersey. I wore white gloves till I was 11 and probably didn't learn to ride a bike until then. My mother had come from a not poor family, and I had never given any thought, particularly, to services to the poor. And I was sitting there struggling to come up with my plan, only I didn't have one. And over 3 hours into it, not having said a word, I took the mic and I said, I need to talk. I'm not mute, but I have something hard to say. And I told my background, that I had never given the subject any thought. And I'm worried you will all think I'm soulless, but that's it. And I had an amazing experience in that moment that I could never have imagined. That when I was connected to my own insides, I actually felt connected to the group, even though in many ways we were not on the same wavelength. I would say half the people in the group didn't like me.
Sure.
Half the people in the group I felt a little intimidated by. But something closed in a gap between me and the world. I actually felt connected. There is a function between when my insides and outsides match. I'm connected to that which is outside of me. I have a partner that I'm quite in love with. At least 90% of the time. And the times I'm most in love with him, Jay, are when I'm having a good experience of myself. There's a very fine line. On those times that I might be walking on eggshells around him or anticipating his reactivity, and I have a diluted experience of myself, I'm not quite as in love. And that's an amazing thing for people to think about I love you. One of the reasons I love you, Jay, actually, I love the experience I have of myself when I'm in your force field. And I would give this for people listening and dating. That's one of the things that you really want to think about when you're dating. Do you feel real to yourself? Mm-hmm. So that Adelphi experience was pivotal in my life.
Right, because what you said is that once you learned how to have your insides match your outsides, you got to have the experience of being connected to other people, even if there was differences, even if there was tension. And it seems to me that it is connected to that initial assignment that Roger gave you, which is if you don't have a self, you aren't relating, period.
Correct. That is absolutely hitting the nail on the head. And unfortunately, what most people consider self-worth is thinking highly of yourself or not talking about a flaw or telling people, these people who so value and feel underserved in terms of their communities, telling them, I've never thought about your communities before. I mean, it wasn't a popular view.
No.
It was even a little embarrassing. 40 years later, I feel a little awkward telling you. But there's something about, if there's a phrase, if you're lying on the floor, no one can throw you out of the bed. There I was. And when people talk about loving yourself, I think they have ideas about it, Jay, that don't hit the mark. In the moment when I told them I've been sitting here trying to devise a plan unsuccessfully, and I'm worried you'll think I'm soulless, that was loving an embarrassing part of me. That's actually what's required.
And that hits on something that I've said a couple of times on this podcast, which is I'm not bought in, nor am I a fan of this whole verbiage of like live your best life. find your best self. Because that's, to me, that's what you're saying here, is that somehow self-worth is attached to a certain version of yourself that's going to be more shiny or more likable in some way, as opposed to being yourself, however that shows up in the moment. Being self-disclosing, being self-accepting, that's what actually leads to the sort of things that people think of when they think of my best self.
Exactly. I had an experience actually yesterday where somebody sent their son to me dealing with an immediate issue. And he happens to be an extremely, I would say, well-adjusted gay guy. And because of some past experiences I've had, I really wanted to work with him, but I had a feeling, and I've been given this feedback before, that in terms of some psychosexual issues, working with a gay male might be a better choice. And so I believed I was being noble, that somebody I would have loved to have worked with. I said, this might be a better choice for you. And in the course of the conversation, I can't say he was insulted, but he was not somebody who wanted to be defined by his sexuality. And he said to me, I want you to know on my list of interesting things about me, I would put my homosexuality as about 47. So what would it mean in that moment for me to be connected to my insides? In truth, I had to feel some shame that what I thought was a noble sacrifice on my part actually minorly insulted him.
Yeah. And
so self-worth is saying, I'm feeling awkward that I felt I was giving you a gift. And in fact, I can see where it might have been a little insulting to you. It didn't feel great being in that moment. I would have loved somebody to say, this is also being true, little egos, thank you so much for being willing to sacrifice me and give, even though you love working. There were so many things I imagined he was going to say, but that's not how it was.
As you're sharing that story, I'm getting moved again because I'm remembering back to when I was working with you, when I was first working with you, and moments like this would come up between us in sessions where I misunderstood the intent behind something you said, or I said something that unintentionally hurt you or seemed to come across in a way that I didn't intend. And you were so graceful and immediate with self-disclosure about what your experience was, that it taught me how to do that. But it also, the reason I moved right now is because it feels so remarkably unique that we don't communicate that way. And it's why I love you, is because we've navigated sticky things and they've been scary for me. You know me enough to know that I do not like people not liking me. I don't like the sensation.
People also don't like awkward.
I don't like awkward. Yeah. And you held me in it quite a bit, enough to teach me that there's so much love available there. You know, I think of, working with clients who have experienced a lot of pain in a relationship with a parent, and, saying to them, can you imagine 25 years later, 30 years later, if your parents said to you, I understand now how that must have felt for you, and then was self-disclosing about what that was like for them. It makes all the difference in the world.
It does. It does. This is, I wouldn't say it's the most typical experience. This is a common experience. And I really want to say something here about the parent-child relationship. I have had a client, the most wonderful guy. I just try to imagine like he's a scout leader, but with a great sense of humor, not an uptight, just a great guy who describes having had the perfect childhood. His parents were teachers in a community where most of the kids were wealthier than he was. So his parents taught in a school where most of the kids, and he was frequently told growing up, you may not have that toy, but we all go camping. In other words, he was told to emphasize non-material things. And he was with a girlfriend who really came from really like the worst background. Doesn't happen that often. Like, where's some connection here? And one day I said to him, he actually idealized his parents. And one day I said to him, what would happen if you wanted an expensive toy? And his parents would say, we just can't afford it. And I said, what would it mean to you if they said, we can't afford it, but I can really understand why you'd want it? And he started to cry.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple, simply being able to enter somebody else's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to enter somebody else's reality, Jay.
Yeah. This was one of the biggest things I learned from you, that idea that there are two reality relationships. And so much of the pain that we experience in relationship is because we don't know how to acknowledge that in how we communicate with one another.
It will not surprise anybody listening to this and knowing you and I have a close connection that I was not a Trump supporter. Okay, that will not be news to anybody listening to this. And I don't know whether anybody was all over the news, a video clip of Trump excoriating the governor, Janet Mills of Maine, who very quietly said that she's going to be following her state guidelines, allowing trans women to be on sports teams. Okay? I think there's actually an argument. I don't have strong feelings about it, but I can understand why someone might not want a trans woman on a women's sports team. I don't have strong feelings. Wouldn't be my biggest criticism of Trump. Trump immediately said, go to your room. Well, no more federal funding for you. I want everybody to hear this. He didn't have to change, in my mind, for me to have respected him more. He didn't have to change his position. He could not want trans women on teams. He didn't even have to call them women. He could have simply said, I recognize it will be a loss for those people. He didn't have to agree with them. He could have simply said, I recognize it will be a loss for those people. And it would have been a whole different experience. Mm-hmm. But that requires that you can have a position and still hold space for the reality of another. And unfortunately, when it said, it's not the norm.
Mm-mm. No, and to me, the flip side of this is the double bind that you talk about that comes up so much for people in relationship. The double bind being that that it feels like my only choice is that I can either betray myself or I can betray another person. And, as we're talking about how to have a self, how to be connected to your inside so you can be connected, in alignment with insides and outsides so you can be connected with another person, how to acknowledge there's two realities. To the person listening who really wants to be true to themselves, but is scared, terrified even, that they will cause harm or rupture, what would you tell them?
First of all, I just want to say that's a great question.
Thank you.
Here's a typical situation, and it's so applicable to so many ways that we're afraid to tell somebody something because they'll be reactive. So what I do is tell somebody my dilemma when I'm worried about disappointing them. So let me give you an example. You come to me and you are furious that you were at a meeting in your corporation and your boss just shamed you, criticized you in front of the whole group, and you are furious. And I feel a strong pull to agree with you that he's treated you terribly. Only what I'm also aware of is that you cursed him out before he went on his tirade. Doesn't seem to be relevant to you. You're just noticing how he made you feel. So this is what I do. I start with my own body. And this is probably something you could give me lessons about. And I just say, Jay, I'm feeling really anxious right now. And by the way, that's an amazing way to ground yourself in an anxiety-provoking situation, to be at one with your insides. I'm feeling a little anxious right now.
Agreed.
I really feel that if I don't agree with you, that your boss treated you horribly, you're going to feel I'm betraying you. But if I don't tell you that I really think you were also being provocative, then I'm betraying myself. Sweetie, I have no place to go here. So what have I done? I'm now requiring you to see my dilemma, how hard it is to relate to you. You are not easy to relate to, Jayfield.
In this moment.
This moment. Yes, in this moment. And so it changes the picture frame. And this is so important to show people the impossible position you've put me in. Either I'm going to betray you or I'm going to betray myself. I don't want to play that game. And sometimes that actually can evoke a better part of that person, recognizing that they've given you no space but to support often their victimhood.
I have two questions. First is, how does someone typically respond when given that sort of reflection?
It goes many ways. Sometimes, ideally, somebody stops in their tracks. They might say, well, I wasn't at my greatest, but he still embarrassed me. And I might then say to them, I wish he had behaved more maturely. But I'm in the position right now, if when you act like it just came out of the blue, then I'm not in reality. So I recognize, I wish he had been able to listen to your upset without hitting you below the belt and publicly. I'm sorry about that. I still can empathize with someone's pain, even if they brought it upon themselves.
This is, listener, why I felt so called up when I was working with Nancy, because you didn't let me get away with bad behavior, but you also didn't make me feel ashamed for that. There was always the clear, you're part of the problem here, essentially, but in such a kind way. So to me, it's not just that you're helping them see your reality. It's that you're helping them see the reality, the complexity of the situation, that in their own wounding or their own hurt, they became myopic. And you're saying, oh, well, look at this other dimension.
I had a situation this morning. I had one client this morning, and I had the thought, this might be grist for our mill. The universe was, I don't want to tell too much story. I'm with a CEO, a very powerful person, CEO of a very large company, and an employee of hers has made a serious error. And it's about the 6th or 7th time this employee has made a 6th or 7th error. My client does not want to fire her. She has 6 children, but she doesn't know what to do. And so she confronts her. And the employee, she's not going to fire her, but the employee says, I can't promise you I'll never do it again. My client, who's learning to respect the truth, who comes from a background where no one ever related to her, doesn't really know how to respond. The woman is making an honest statement. And now we're going to get into a new piece about being related to. This is how I I gave my client a suggestion about how she might have responded to that woman. I admire your honesty, and you're certainly helping me manage my expectations. I will not expect perfection. You've given me a cue. But it would have felt so much better if you had also said, I can understand why you'd be upset with me. And again, we're taking two realities into account. Right. Okay, the woman said that was a statement of truth, but that would leave me feeling unrelated to if she did something that put my business in jeopardy. Did something bad. And just said, I can't promise I won't do it again. What do you do in a moment like that? If you know you deserve someone to care how you feel, you say, I'm being a little snide here. Well, goody for you that you'll never do it. You might do it again and you're being honest about it. But it would have been nice if you could have also said, that's a lot of grace, and I can appreciate why you'd be upset with me.
I'm hoping that the person listening is really feeling those words, because, it wasn't intentional how our conversation is built, Nancy, but we started by talking about, in order to be true to yourself, first you have to have a self. And in being able to speak from your experience, because this is what we're talking about. If you're going to be in a two-reality system, you have to have some awareness of what your reality is.
Correct.
You have to have an awareness that you're a self, that you have an experience, you have an emotion. I'm anxious, I'm upset. And I think this is the piece that people, at least who I work with, struggle the most, which is how to, how do I want to say this? To find the words that are that just unfiltered, but also uncharged truth of experience. How do you help someone with that?
Well, I would have to say this is actually the core of anybody's serious personal growth process. You're at. It's a very big question you're asking. It's not a tributary. It's like the core of it.
Yeah.
But in some way, and this is what I got from my elevator music, period, is to ask a question counter to the question we're usually asking, which is, how am I going to land in the other person? Which is, am I feeling real? What's real? What's real? What's real? And what's real may be, I'm afraid of you. I'd like to share, relevant to this, I want to share an amazing dating experience I had. Can I do that? I want to share a dating experience along these lines.
I love your stories.
Yes. After I was divorced, I met a man online. I'm a writer. He was a writer. Amazing guy, a writer. The Library of Congress once named his book of poetry the book of the month. He had a PhD in anthropology. He had written 8 books. As part of the story, he had written a book from an anthropologist's point of view on craft beer. He knew when there was the plague in 13th century France why they put juniper berries in the beer. Okay, right guy. We were both falling in like before our first date, and then we meet in 20 minutes. It was like heaven, and I'm taking this guy very seriously. And I say to him, I'm really liking you. Okay, everybody notice that's a positive thing, right? I'm liking you. I have something I'm a little nervous about. There's been some alcoholism in my family. I had a problematic relationship with problematic situation with a partner with drinking. And I notice you've written a book on beer, and it makes me a little nervous.
Wow.
First date, 20 minutes into it. And he goes, you've got to be kidding.
Ooh.
It was pure hostility. And I want everybody listening to this to watch what happens, our choices when we feel diminished. My heart was like this. I'm telling him, I'm taking you seriously. This is like real vetting here. And then I feel slammed. So we have 2 choices, basic choices when that happens. To go one down or one up. One down would have been immature Nancy. I'm so sorry. I am just so sorry. That was such an inappropriate question. Okay, I was way beyond that. Jay, I was this close to saying to him, you know what? Alcohol is important to you. I want you to go order a drink right now and go nurse that drink. I am leaving.
I'm out.
I'm out. And that was managing my humiliation, that I was in a loving space, a warm space with someone, and I felt slammed.
That's the one up.
Okay, so now everybody listening to this is going to hear the real value in real time when you do practice exercises with people you don't care about to build a muscle. And I said to myself, what would I tell Craig? Craig is somebody I mentored. Sometimes I get my best answer. I could say, what would I tell Jay? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I sat across someone, date number 1, and I said, I came here liking you, and now I'm afraid of you.
Oh.
Normally, this is not first date material, but boy, it's a great way to find out who's in front of you. So I just said, I came here liking you, and now I'm afraid of you. And he said, I'm not going to bite. And I said, you already have.
Yeah.
Silence.
Boom.
And then I say to him, I like you. And I was simply wanting to. I started a sentence, and he said, and I took it personally. I said, yeah. And to his credit, and this is what I want people to hear, because many, particularly women on a growth path, a guy does one assholey thing, you're done. Mm-hmm. You have the whole picture. You have to find out who somebody is underneath their defenses. And he said, I don't like how I was with you. Can we start again? And we started again, and he responded well. And then I found out something. I assumed he was defensive because he was a problem drinker. I later found out that he would actually taste. He was a connoisseur, and that he would spit. And he came from a generation of bright men, my generation in Brooklyn, who went to, were doctors, lawyers, Wharton businessmen, and he was an anthropologist and a poet. And when he heard me questioning something, it was questioning his solidity and his legitimacy, actually, that I wasn't appreciating he was a connoisseur or an expert. I was putting him in the category of a lush or an alcoholic.
And here's the thing that strikes me about that. In that moment, I am 100% sure he was not aware that that's why he was responding defensively like that.
Totally.
And if you don't have a skill set to kind of stay, I call it staying in the pocket, like just kind of staying in, okay, so I'm just going to say what's real here. You won't ever get to what's real. And yes, he had the capacity to do that with you, which is, this is what you're doing. You're learning. Does this person, if we hit a bump, have the capacity to stay with what's real and get there with me?
Yes, this is so, I just love how you put that, Jay. There are so many women who've gotten rid of their codependent relationships or their bullying boyfriends and have done some work, and now they want a man who's done the work. Okay, what woman doesn't want a man? Probably 3/4 of the people listening to this want a man who's done the work. The truth of the matter is they only do the work when they're with you. I'm an expert on this. I'm really good at it. And I've had my life partner for the last 5 years, and we have to do the work here. There's no finished product. And you only find out what somebody's really made of if you see that they can go underneath their defenses, not just walk away. I ended up with that man for 4.5 years until he died. Unfortunately, he ended up with brain cancer. But I would have walked away that evening. Now, when I said to him, I'm scared of you, I feel afraid of you, and I got another hostile response, that might have been the end of it. But he showed me he could hold space for my vulnerability. But how would I have known that if I hadn't been willing to be vulnerable first?
Yes. So this is reminding me of how when I was first working with you, you kind of helped me realize that the relationship I was in, which you were well aware that was unhealthy, you didn't encourage me to leave. you encouraged me to see it as a remedial aid, which
Yes.
to this day, I use that language with my clients because it's so freaking perfect. Remedial aid. And that then when I did leave that relationship and I started going on dates, you were like, because I at that point felt like I had a broken picker. And I'm sure there's someone listening who feels that same way too, that you're just like, I've been on
What do you
broken
mean
picker.
in terms of who you picked?
And I was so desperate, like you're saying, to find the man who was willing to do the work with me, that I was jumping to conclusions. And so you taught me about how to use even bad dates as growth experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
I can. I'm speaking to everybody here who's ever said the date was what a waste of my time. No, you just made it, you didn't maximize it. I once had a date with a guy. It was a second date, and I suggested, it was for a number of reasons, it was going to be a lunch date. And I said to him, I'd like to go to a place that has 101 omelets. It was for lunch. And he immediately says to me, I didn't say I wanted breakfast, I want lunch. Okay. Old Nancy would have just said, I mean, out of your friggin' mind. I mean, leave me alone. When you're connected to your own insides and you have a sense that was abusive, that was nutty, it was an amazing moment when I just looked at him and said, do you think I'm going to force you to eat something you don't want? Wow. Wow. I had no desire to go out with that guy again or see him again. We had a lunch. But the point is, particularly with someone who doesn't matter to you that much, what an amazing thing that when something feels off, to be able to call it and just enjoy yourself, or to be on a date, and this could turn out well, to say to someone on I wouldn't say it on a first date, but I might on a second date, say, you have convinced me that your ex-wife is truly Cruella's sister. I got it. Do you see anything that you did that led to the demise or the difficulties in your marriage? In other words, to take that person and take the thing that you're judging, why you're looking at your watch and regretting that you're there, and actually telling the person or asking the person something that might make you uncomfortable, but would make it more alive, about talking about what was really going on, even saying to someone, not in a toxic situation, but to say to someone, this conversation's feeling a little pro forma. We know each other's colleges and what we majored in and where our parents were born, but don't you think something's feeling a little flat? Can we make this more interesting? I'm not blaming you. I'm doing it something to practice being real and bringing aliveness. And people have often said to me, but I'm not interested in him. And I have said this, if there is one thing I've said in my office more than anything you've heard, you're not doing this to improve your relationship with the guy. You're doing this to improve your relationship with yourself.
This is me throwing my arms up in the air repeatedly for those of you who can't see me. Yes.
That's what I want people to know. You're not doing it because you want to get closer to that guy. You want to be able to teach yourself, go past all of your conditioning, that it's not dangerous to be connected to your own insides, stranger or not.
Yes. And this, for those of you who've been listening along, you've heard me talk about Hey Wait. And if you listen to the first podcast, you know that Hey Wait came out of a brilliant teaching from Nancy. That's what this is. It's, hey, wait, this feels off to me. Hey, wait, this is my experience. And it is a call for aliveness and relating. And that, for me, when you taught me, like, this isn't about trying to get the other person to change. This isn't about trying to make the relationship better. It's about having a better experience of yourself so you can walk away from that date and go, well, I don't want to see that person again, but I like who I am.
Exactly. Exactly. It's, in this sense, there's so many people that I have met who are not in relationships, although there are certainly many unhappy people in relationships, who just feel it's like empty space, and they have no idea what they can be doing in a day-to-day situation. They go to the dentist's office and they just mindlessly come up to the receptionist and say, how long do I have to wait for my appointment? And the receptionist snaps at them, can't you see I'm on the phone or something? That's an opportunity to say, I miss that. And I wish you could have told me in a gentler way.
Both. Yes.
Yes.
Here's
Say,
what's
I'm
true
sorry.
for me.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't see that. And you could have spoken to me in a gentler way. And that's teaching yourself something here really about your own reality. I want to emphasize this point, Jay, around the whole idea of being related to as opposed to reacted to. I want to make a distinction here, and I don't know whether I've actually made this with you. I want to say something fresh here. There are a lot of people who rail against the concept of childhood wounding and will tell me how wonderful their childhoods are. And then I begin feeling a little like Cruella's sister, suggesting otherwise. So I want to say something publicly in this forum. I want to give a typical childhood example, distinguishing relating and reacting. This happened a number of times, actually, with my daughter. My daughter's 7 or 8 years old. She has a backpack on her back. We're about to go to a birthday party, slumber party. We're all ready to go, present in hand. And she says, Mommy, I don't want to go. I feel nervous. I don't want to be away from home tonight. Call the kid. I'm not going. I haven't taken a survey, but in my sense of things, 8 mothers out of 10 will be very gentle. And they say, oh, sweetie, you know how much you love being with Michelle. You'll have a good time when you're there. Is anybody looking at that mother and saying, you're wounding your child? No. But what the mother is doing is she's managing her own anxiety that the child isn't looking perfect to her. And she's not relating to the child. This is what I want everybody listening. This is it. When you think about your childhoods, it's great that nobody bad touched you. Nobody hit you. I get it. You had good values. You went on camping trips. Your problems in relationship is because your mother said, you have a good time when you're with Michelle, or you really like that present that Aunt Mandy gave you. Relating to the child is, now I'm nervous as my daughter listening to this and thinking of the times I didn't do. If you want
Right.
if you want an authentic moment with me right now, okay? She will be counting the times I didn't walk my talk. I say to my daughter, birthday parties can be scary. I didn't like them sometimes either. I hear that you're nervous. How would it be if I went with you and I stayed for 20, 25 minutes, and then you'll decide whether you want to come home or stay?
You enter her
I'm
world.
relating to the feeling.
Yeah.
Now, when you grow up confused and you call what the mother did relating, and she can do it in the kindest tones. Oh, honey, you love Michelle.
Yes.
You become confused and don't know what to do when something feels wrong, but you don't have the ground inside of you to say, I don't feel related to. I tell people this story, I don't know whether you've ever heard it before, Jay, as the high point of my life, and I've had some exciting things happen. I contributed to Barack Obama's speeches. I got a job offer at the New York Times. Okay, I've had some exciting things happen to me. I'm going to now tell you the most exciting thing. I'm not going to go into the details. I once had an extraordinary experience with my daughter probably 15, 16 years ago, where unbelievably we both had been in different trainings 20 miles apart in the woods of Ontario at the same time. My daughter is an ASL interpreter. She was in an interpreting conference. I was at a spiritual conference. And I had a beautiful experience at the spiritual conference. And then I met up with my daughter, who triggered me. And instead of me behaving in my ungodly way, I took my spiritual training. And it was a beautiful moment between my daughter. I'm not going to spend the time going into it. 2 days later, a couple took me out to dinner, took me out for brunch, actually, and wanted to hear about my experience. And I told them about what was a very moving experience for me with my daughter. And the man happened to have been in a psycho-spiritual business sort of thing where for years he's wanted me on his board. I have no interest in being in on anybody's board. I love you dearly. I would never want to be on your board. Okay.
I won't ask.
Okay. And I tell a story that's very moving. And he turns to his wife and he says, I told you she belongs on my board. And now you're going to hear the high point of my life. I lean over to him and I take his arm. I'm going to make up his name. And I'm going to say, Mark, first you have to say to me, Nancy, what a moving experience you had with your daughter. Mm-hmm. And why I say it's the high point of my life, I didn't go one down. I think I've been a little too abrupt. Of course, I'll join your board. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say, asshole, will you fucking relate to me?
Right. Okay?
You missed the point. I so knew I deserved to be related to. I could do it with grace and humor. That is the high point of my life.
Yes.
Because like most of us, you, me, everybody listening, we did not grow up with people relating to us. They reacted to us.
Yeah.
And I knew I deserved. And here's the thing, because I knew I deserved it, there was no edge to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is a hey, wait moment. That's how I describe a hey, wait moment.
Yes,
you
that
see,
was a hey.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see, this is a moment where I wasn't being related to. I don't have to become a bitch. I don't have to become a shrinking violet. I can just, with humor, because that's the piece. When you don't question that you deserve to be related to, you can make it light. Hey, wait, I'm going to ask you first to acknowledge that was a really moving moment. So good. And I understand, Nancy, how that is one of the most important, significant moments of your life.
Thank you. Thank you. It was one of these moments, therapy and growth can take a long time in the sense, I don't think there's such a thing as a finished product. I am not one. My partner is not one. I don't know finished products. But there are moments that occur if you really take your own healing seriously, Jay. There are moments when you really see you're at a new seat of being and that you no longer have to fight for something. I am somebody, a lot of my years standing up for myself rather than being myself. That would have been an example. Actually, I'm missing my therapist now who died many years ago, where I was being myself. That would have been an example where I was being myself, not standing up for myself.
Yes.
It's such a beautiful distinction.
It is, and it is a distinct distinction, standing up for yourself versus being
And I just
yourself.
want to say here in this public forum, if I were to say one of the many ways you, Jay, have blossomed, is when I first met you, you definitely had some capacity to not stand up for yourself or stand up for yourself. But what's so unbelievable right now is the breadth and all the ways that you're just being yourself. Mm-hmm. And what a powerful, powerful healing force you are when you're just low-key being yourself.
Thank you.
There were days you needed to stand up for yourself, and there were days you stood up for yourself. It's a very different ballgame right now.
It is, and it is in large part, hugely, thanks to you. And I was thinking as you were telling that last story, how many times I would tell you about an exchange I'd had with my parents or a boyfriend or a friend, and you would walk me through how I could say it differently. And then you would tell me the next time you see them, I want you to revisit this with them. And we would work it through, and you would say, and if you say that, that is the equivalent of a year of therapy.
I was probably exaggerating.
But there's a truth to it in the sense of a person, myself included, can understand, oh, that's how I should have done that differently. I see what you're saying. I understand the concept. But to actually then go put yourself in a body and with your breath and with your tongue, say words that are true and asking to be related to, it changed me on a cellular level.
Oh, that is so lovely to hear. And a simple intervention for people is, rather than slamming someone for the terrible way they did something or said something, to say to someone, it would have felt so good if you had. I would have, you know what, I see your point, but I would have felt related to if you had also acknowledged the effort I put in.
Yes.
I would have felt related to. Now, why is this sort of both tricky and magical? If you don't know you deserve to be related to, you don't have that language. That's what I'm hoping people will get from this, that you deserve to feel related to. I mean, how many times are you in a conversation with somebody and passionately they're free associating to what you're saying, but it's not a congruent response. Mm-hmm. You don't know what to do because clearly they're engaged with what they're saying, but you don't feel they've actually responded to what you said. What do? You say, I feel really awkward right now. I see how passionate you are about what you're expressing to me, but I feel a little left on the dock. You're not really responding to what I asked, or you're not responding to the question that I asked. That happens all the time. People immediately go into the next thought in their head.
So, listener, I have an idea for you. If you're hearing this and you're like, I want to get better at this, I know what to tell them, Nancy. So I have your book here. If anyone's looking at the video, Talk to Me Like I'm Someone You Love. And the reason I'm bringing this up, again, if you can see this, I'm showing that on each page of the book, one side there's a phrase that you can use in a certain circumstance, and on the other side is a story as to when that's been used with a client of yours or with you and how that turned out. And when I first read this book, I give this book to every client I work with. And the homework assignment I first give them is, I want you to read each one of these phrases. Don't read the stories behind them. Just look through the book and read every one of these phrases and feel in your body where you would have to be in yourself to say that phrase. Because I don't know, how many of them are there? 100 and some?
127.
127. By the 127th phrase that you've read, that is essentially a way to be asked to be related to. You get in your bones, oh, this is what it would feel like to ask. It doesn't mean you can do it yet, but this is the way I practiced. I just read this over and over and over and over again until it opened up a whole new part of my brain or a whole new part of my reality where it's like, oh, I could say that thing because it's just true. There's no charge.
You know, it's so interesting. Many of my interviews I had, Jay, were about my book, and it's so interesting we haven't even talked about my book. It's amazing what happens when you simply hold up the flashcard and the very act that you're trying to do something different. I want to say something to you about you repeating what you just said, repeating the phrases. When a couple of years ago, my agent said they were going to put this book on Audible, I said, this is a visual aid. Why are we putting this book on Audible? It didn't make sense to me. I wasn't upset by it. I just didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And unbelievably, it's actually been, in terms of self-help books, it's not quite there right now, number 2 or 3 in self-help book on Audible. And I've asked people why they like it on Audible when it's flashcards. And they say, because they've never heard people sound sane.
Yes.
In an argument.
Yes. Yes.
The auditory cue actually tells them real people can say something like one of the a flashcard I like. You're not being crazy. I can see why you'd be upset with me.
Yeah.
People just don't hear people say things like that. I can
No.
see why you'd be upset with me. You want to stop an argument? You just tell the other person. You just tell the other. You want a magic elixir here? You just say to the other person, "I can see why you'd be upset with me." Magic will ensue because
Yes.
the person doesn't need just hit their specific point home. They need to feel that you understand why they're triggered
Yes.
or that they're triggered.
Yes. Believe me, I have experienced magic with these phrases. Okay, so I know that I love that we talked about your book. This is the last chapter, as it were. This next chapter for you, I want to make sure we have time to talk about this because this is really exciting. You mentioned that before you were a psychotherapist, you were a journalist, and that then you decided you were going to honor how internally oriented you were. You ran off, became a psychotherapist. But now, decades later, in this climate that we're in that is becoming increasingly unsettling, you are being called to bring together your journalistic acumen with your psychotherapeutic wisdom to talk about what's really happening. And I'm so thrilled that you're doing this because nobody's talking about what's going on in this way. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on or what you're doing with this?
You are. This is very exciting for me, Jay. This is the very first time I've been able to talk about this publicly.
Oh, good.
So, I left journalism because I was in my own therapy. I was learning a lot about my own dynamics, and what journalistic objectivity was that you weren't dealing with anything in the realm of the unseen. And what I say is I left journalism because it was no place for a fan of the unconscious. I'm a fan, right? And you know what in a newspaper a sidebar is? A sidebar is a more factual explanation of something going on in the news. So there's a tsunami in Indonesia. We have a sidebar explaining tsunamis. We have sales in weight loss drugs. We have a sidebar in how weight loss drugs work. Jeffrey Epstein is arrested. We have a whole thing explaining how sex cabals work or whatever, called sidebar. It is unbelievable to me in journalism, which is rarely why I left, that there are no sidebars, drum roll, explaining how human beings work.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples. And this is what to me right now is my passion. If we have a multi-convicted felon, sexual predator, somebody who's committed many crimes, and he always calls people crooks, favorite word, we would think we would have a little sidebar that says when somebody who is a multi-convicted felon in denial is constantly calling people crooks, it is likely, we don't have to diagnose, it is likely we are seeing the defense mechanism called projection.
Yes.
Okay, that would be a sidebar. How I really got interested in this was in 2019. There was a situation where Trump was in the Situation Room. It was his first presidency, and they got to watch a terrorist who was in a suicide vest being captured and detonating his suicide vest. Okay, so they watched it. He was in the Situation Room with 25 to 30 eagle-eyed Pentagon generals, okay? He is the only person in a room of 30 people, including eagle-eyed generals, who says he died like a little girl, whimpering and crying like a weak little girl. Okay? If I had been a journalist in a liberal newspaper that allowed me to do it, I would say when somebody who often is in denial of his feminine side speaks disparagingly of somebody's feminine side that nobody else saw, we are seeing a defense mechanism of projection. He's seeing that which he judges his own feminine side. But newspapers heard him say this. There was an article on it. One was called, at the Times, The Whimpering Terrorist, that no one else saw. But there was no explanation. There was no interpretation. 25 generals said that they didn't hear him say it, and it's just left. So in my mind, it's a serious failure in journalism in terms of educating the public as to somebody not being in reality and what that's about. So if sidebar is spelled Sidebar, I am on the verge of launching a Substack newsletter. It's going to take probably a couple of weeks to get it going, called Sidebar, PSYD.
Yeah.
Psychology, where I want to. It was a moment when the word came to me. I have to say, it felt divinely choreographed. It just felt so exciting when I saw that spelling of sidebar, because what I've really wanted to do is figure out ways that don't really taint objectivity, but actually add to the facts. When you don't bring some of this psychological information in the news, I say it's fake news.
Yeah, it's not real. We're not seeing the whole picture. I mean, this is whether you're talking about conversation over dinner on your second date or looking at what's happening in this larger political sphere. If you are not able to see the reality of the situation, you're not really relating to reality.
The whole idea that it's tainting objectivity.
Yeah.
It shows you, though, even with what might be liberal journalists, the taboo on this planet about dealing with that which is not seen. I've used this analogy before. I don't know exactly. There are scientists listening to this who may correct me, but I'm saying in the 1300s, they may not have known why eclipses occurred. And suddenly the world got dark. And there's a belief that it's because the gods are angry at me or angry at our tribe or whatever. I sometimes read the newspaper, and that's what it's like, that they're explaining that the eclipse is because the gods are angry. And I know the real answer. I know why Trump saw that as a little whimpering girl. Didn't say whimpering boy, little whimpering girl.
Yeah.
There's no reason. But I have to pretend that there's an eclipse because the gods are angry at us rather than give the real explanation.
Fucking preach, Nancy Dreyfus. I'm telling you.
We
need this. We need this.
Thank you for getting what I want to do. I mean, I got a job offer at the New York Times. I won a major journalism award. It was definitely the road not taken.
Yeah.
And
but here it's come back.
And now I just really feel I want to be able. I now trust my own reality. Let's see how my life went full circle. In order for me to connect to journalism, I had to be clear enough about my own reality that I'm not being a fruitcake.
That's it.
And that means also going beyond my childhood training with a mother who would always say, "What planet are you on?"
Yes.
Just saying. So I am now clear enough that what I want to do is enhancing journalism, not tainting it. And now I have the courage to go for it.
I am so thrilled that you are in this full circle moment, because the world needs it. And you are uniquely skilled to do it. And I will be the first person to sign up. So if the person listening wants more of you, where could they? You're on Blue Sky right now. Is that where you're going to be announcing Sidebar?
On Blue Sky. I did a little video called in October, "Don't You Want a Grown Up as President?" And I was thrown off X. I was actually,
really?
Yes, I was suspended
from
X. And I would invite people to go to my website if they want to find out more about me, nancydreyfus.com, and to possibly, they can, not necessarily right now, you can't be a paid subscriber. I haven't launched yet, but you can sign up to be a future subscriber for Nancy Dreyfus on Substack.
We need this. We need this. So when you let me know, I'll spread the word as well to my people.
Thank you. Jay, this has been so lovely in the sense of things that we learned together that you're now, I mean this in the most affectionate way, kind of grilling me on.
Cool. It's about damn time I got to grill you on something. I think I've been grilled. So, yeah. And I just, you said these words. You're so good with words, so I'm going to steal your words. You said the universe was having a good day when they put you and I together. And I'm feeling that immensely.
Yes. And I wanted, thank you. The universe was having an extraordinary day, a very good day when they thought to introduce us, and who knew where this was, who knew this was going. I have one final word I want to give to people about a good phrase that I've been using recently.
Oh, good.
Because we all want to make so much happen. And we push and we try to get things to happen and we effort. And as I look through my life, some of the best things happened when I stopped efforting. And I believe that there's, whether people here are looking at this through a spiritual perspective, a religious perspective, or an atheist perspective, the idea that we're all part God or part goddess. And I've been saying to myself lately, when I feel push energy, goddesses don't beg.
Ooh. Talk about preach, Nancy Dreyfus.
Stops me. It's a I was thinking, what's a hey, wait moment?
Yeah.
When I watch any of my push energy, including with my partner, goddesses don't beg, nor do gods.
I feel that in my hips.
There you go. This is the somatic, everybody listening, this is the somatic piece Jay has, which she teaches me.
That is powerful. Goddesses don't beg.
And that is what stops me in my tracks.
Yeah.
No goddess would need to beg, right?
Absolutely. All right, listener, that is your homework because I know there's going to be a moment where that is the exact phrase you need to say to yourself to reclaim yourself and come back to that place where you have a sense of self that doesn't have to be bigger than or less than. It just gets to be you-sized. So thank you for those words, Nancy. And thank you for being here.
I just love you. I do.
I love you too. I do too. I love you too. And I love me because you loved me as well. That's the other piece. I love myself more because of how you loved me. And that is such a gift. Thank you, listener, as well, for being here. I hope you enjoyed. This has been an ultimate treat for me to get to share Nancy with you. And in the spirit of what we've been talking about, what Nancy's been sharing about two realities, I want to thank you for listening. But I also want to say, I want to make sure you know I want to listen to you as well. So if you have any comments or questions, or if you want to share your own hey wait moments, I want to hear them. And you can email me through my website, or you can DM me on Instagram at heywaitwithjay, because I want you to feel like we're in this together. Oh. And I'm going to end by saying what I always say to you. And Nancy, I think you'll appreciate this. Hey, wait, remember that your insides matter, and your insides matter, and the right people will be able to meet you there. So stay with yourself.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see you guys next week.